Welcome to IPython office hours for the 1st of July, 2014. Yeah, so we're here to take questions and discuss IPython topics and plans that people are interested in. If Massimo, if you wanted to get things started, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Massimo. I'm working on a project that is deeply using the IPython notebook. At the moment, we are trying to collect the provenance of a scientific workflow and try to embed inside the notebook using the JSON-LD format what happens for each cell, and so try to collect the metadata that about the workflow that we are building inside the notebook. Specific to the notebook, we are using the display function and the metadata object. So this is what I'm interested on. And I was also trying to develop a set of widgets based on Flask, and having this widget embedded in the notebook using an iframe. And this iframe in URL takes as input the connection file of the kernel, so that you can talk between Flask and the notebook.
Okay. So you're running one notebook server and then running another web server with Flask, and then you're putting the regular notebook server in an iframe.
Correct.
Okay. And how are you communicating? Are you communicating from any of the surrounding JavaScript and the stuff served by Flask, communicating with the notebook, or are you just serving it and letting the client talk to it?
To establish the communication, the only things that Flask knows is the connection file, so it's connected to the kernel. They are running on the same host.
Okay, so the Flask server is also connected to the same kernel.
Yes, correct.
So you have a separate. So you've got two separate things connected.
Yeah, the Flask app takes as input in the URL the connection file as with the full path.
Okay.
And is given in the notebook by the connection info application instance connection file. So I gave this as parameter in URL, and Flask knows which file, where is the file, and load it using the non-blocking kernel, non-blocking client functionalities. So I'm building a simple widget like if I need something to upload files, or I have some web services that are like with a RESTful URL, so I can give parameters from the notebook back to the service that can run also as a standalone application.
Okay.
So that's why I have a notebook that, as example, can list it.
And so we've talked before, and you've had some issues getting the metadata that you want into the notebook.
Yeah, correct. I was looking for something like for a script in Python. If we have a script and use the __file__, he understands where the file is and what's his name. I was thinking about something like that for the notebook kernel. So for the specific notebook that I'm opening. The reason is because I want at the end of the I'm trying to do at the end of the notebook in a cell a way to parse itself, because I'm storing all this metadata in JSON-LD at the cell output metadata level. And I have other metadata in the same JSON-LD format that are at the notebook metadata level. And what I'm trying to do, parsing each cell plus the notebook metadata, is to build a final JSON-LD file that is comprehensive of all the metadata that are inside the notebook and generate a TTL or RDF structure or what happened in the notebook. So having it as an external file or embedded in the JSON, and then I have a JSON parser that will take care of it. But in order to store all this information in one single container, I was trying to parse the notebook. But if I don't know which file it is, I need to like run an external application like run IPy and give as input a list of notebooks. This was my workaround for now.
Yeah, there's a general issue of so there's a design principle in IPython that kernels, so this comes from the fact that kernels can have many front ends connected to them. So you can have Qt console, terminal console, notebook, all of the above, none of the above. So you can have zero to many front ends. So it doesn't always make perfect sense to have the kernel know what file it's associated with, because the kernel actually doesn't know it's associated with a file at all.
Yeah, I understand that.
And it's tricky because we actually, since the notebook server starts kernels, we absolutely could break that abstraction and just set file, because in the default case, we know what the file is. The process that starts the kernel knows what the file is that it's associated with. It gets a bit more complicated in the notebook server because notebooks aren't necessarily on the file system. Right, so the notebook manager that ships with IPython just uses the file system, but there are third-party notebook managers like Calculus Bookstore that's backed by Rackspace Cloud files and some OpenSwift something.
Yeah, and it will begin to be more complicated also with the multi-user interface to the same notebook, I guess. Like, so it's one more reason to let's explain that this cannot be done. Like,
yeah, but that's yeah. At the same time, in the common case, it's relatively easy with by displaying a bit of JavaScript to get the notebook name back, and the way kernels are started. You know, if you assume you're in kind of the default configuration environment, you know, with the default file notebook server and everything, which is probably a reasonable assumption for you, because I don't know how generic you want your tool to be for people to use in all the many various contexts. But it's fairly easy to get the notebook name from the front end.
Yep.
There's just a little, you can display JavaScript that can, and then the JavaScript can grab the name and send it back, and then just with the base name, that's enough information for because the kernel starts in the same directory as the notebook file.
Yeah, I used it when sometimes I'm during the cells. I need to publish as a gist on NBViewer a specific state of the notebook. Let's say we have a long workflow. At some point in the middle of the workflow, I have a JavaScript that checks the name of the notebook and save it, and then generate a gist at that point, and then it goes. I added a sleep function, like in order to be sure that has the time to be saved, and make the gist. Yeah, but it's, in this way, I know the name, and I know how he knows how to save itself. But if I need to parse the JSON file, I need to know where it is stored. So I think that I should mix, like, using the configuration file, understand which profile is used at that moment, and try to understand the IPython notebook dir, and then join the path.
Since the kernel starts in the same directory as the notebook file, you only need the base name of the notebook file.
Yeah, if there is no change in directory during the.
Well, and if you do, basically what you do is you make sure you do this first in your notebook, and
Yeah,
then you
and
and then you store the absolute path of current working directory and plus base name is the full file name, and just keep that around. And then you'll have the. It's a bit ugly, certainly uglier than just using dunder file, but.
Yeah, it's just that can be embedded in the API, but I can derive it using the JavaScript functionalities.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, that will work. So this was what I was doing with the Flask that is not related to the metadata. And,
okay.
And something like this, but this is the MBViewer link.
There's actually, so I see you using bangcat. IPython has built-in, there's a magic called pycat that will, it's like cat for Python files, but it.
Yeah, it works also without the exclamation mark, right?
Start kernel. Show profile. Yeah. Yes, that's a good use case of using multiple clients connected to one kernel. Cool.
Yeah, and instead, this is the MBViewer link to the notebook where I was talking about the metadata. So what I do is to add in a function also this like so each function that I'm writing has a option that is prov equal true, and when prov is equal true, what happens is this. And just as I will to find the link on GitHub. It's ugly, I know, but maybe I don't know if someone else that is working in a provenance collection maybe can be interested in some sort of approach like this. So let's say here. So at this link. So what it does is when prov is equal true, the code write in the metadata the name of the function, a link to the source code, and all the parameters that were used to call that function.
Okay.
So that in this way, so merging every time that the prov is equal true in each cell, and actually I was happy to see that if I type 2 or n times the display function inside the single cell, the metadata are appended in a list. So it's not that I need one function. So that's really good. So what I'm trying to do is to parse this information and generate a JSON LD structure at the notebook level metadata. So that then can be like used on things like Sparkle query or things like that in order to. So these are the two topics. So I will try with the JavaScript functionalities to generate the path to the notebook name and parse the file, and then add the results of the parsing in the notebook metadata, using again the JavaScript edit metadata function.
Yeah, and the other option. So one option is you've got your is adding the JSON, writing to the notebook metadata on the Python side. The other option is to implement that stuff in JavaScript, and then what you do from the Python side is just execute, add this stuff to the notebook level metadata.
I understand.
And then JavaScript takes care of it, and then you don't actually have to have direct access to the file.
It's something like we have an extension for on the JavaScript side. I saw there are some extension like save to HTML or save, that you can export as a static HTML file. The notebook, and it used the NB-convert to do that. So will be something that I can write my own notebook parser and use that instead of NB-convert. And how can I?
What's the goal for?
Yeah, the goal is to, as you said, using JavaScript to parse the notebook.
No, what I mean is the reason you need the notebook path is to manipulate the file and write stuff to the metadata.
Yep. Yes.
But you could do that. The JavaScript already has the notebook, but the notebook lives in the JavaScript. When you've got the notebook open, it lives in the JavaScript side. So you could, from the kernel, publish this information should go in the notebook metadata.
Yep. I want there so that I have one single file that contains everything.
Yeah. So you would do, you're right, in the HIP chat, something like display something like what I just typed in there. So you can, I've got my parentheses a bit wrong, but you can publish JavaScript that will execute in the browser, and that can write to the notebook level metadata. And then you don't need access to the file on disk from the Python side.
Okay, so you mean that I can use this inside the function where I have prob equal true?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, in this way I will avoid to write metadata at the cell output level, but they will go directly in that notebook metadata, right?
Yeah, it's a way to if you want it. I'm thinking that maybe we want a mechanism to kind of a higher level API to update metadata. I don't know if it's a new message type or something to update metadata, to update notebook metadata from the kernel. But right now, the only way to do that is to request the execution of explicit JavaScript in the front end.
And here, where you type metadata.key, that key should be a key that is already available in the metadata, or is
So it's in JavaScript, the objects and dictionaries are the same thing. So if a key in a dictionary, that's the same as dictionary assignment. If a key is a valid identifier in JavaScript, there's no difference between dictionary assignment with a string and.
Okay, so it's something that it's not part of the API. It's something that I have to define the key.
And the key. Yeah, that's you. Wherever you want to put your metadata.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but just treat it like a dictionary.
Yeah, I think this approach makes things a little bit easier, because the function that I'm writing, they are supposed to, the prob equal true will run only if that function is run inside a notebook. So it makes sense to use a specific IPython notebook feature. Like it's not that they will run this in a standard shell.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. And Stephen, is that right?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit quiet.
Okay, maybe this is a bit better. I could have got my... So we're UK science informaticians, I guess, we run a cloud infrastructure for atmospheric science in the UK, and we're just building a cloud infrastructure where people can come and create virtual machines, and we want to be able to make the notebook available. Yeah, and clearly the multi-user notebook that you've had on your roadmap for a bit, it seems like a really interesting way of doing it. We're also aware of things like Wakari and CityLab a bit, yes. So we're going to have to start work on actually providing something for a particular project pretty soon, like month. And we'd like to get an idea of where the status is now, how we can keep an eye on what you're doing. I got quite a good idea from the June 19th lab meeting that I caught up with the other day, where you were talking about the nitty-gritty of your initial work. So I suppose I can see that it's, sort of fairly early. You've got the design and you're trying to get something going. We'd like to see know how we can keep an eye on code that we can try when it's available. Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So right now I'm actually prototyping the proxy stuff in just a personal repo that once, what the hell did I call it?
Yeah. Multi-user server.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where it's basically a scratch pad to make sure that I actually know what the hell's going on with the cookies and the proxy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then, so right now, so SciPy is next week, and we're giving an array of tutorials and talks and buffs and things. So there won't be much progress on much of anything in IPython for about the next week and a half. But after that, I just have a little bit more kind of figuring out to do that I'll probably do in that repo, and then we'll create kind of the real repo, which will be on the Oregon. We'll announce once that repo exists, it will be on the mailing list, and there will be an IPEP that I also have half written that will be a page on our GitHub wiki that describes kind of the structure of the thing. But yeah, the gist of the multi-user server is basically the thinnest possible thing to make starting users' notebooks as their Unix Linux user with their full permissions, full shell access, and everything, and just make that a simple thing to deploy. So kind of the moving pieces are, there's a node HTTP proxy in the front. There's still don't even know what to call it. There's the multi-user server is basically just handles logging in and spawning single user servers and updating the proxy to forward connections to the single user servers. So the main features are you don't need to open multiple ports. There will just be one port that you point to the proxy, and the proxy will handle mapping URLs to the various server instances. And then there's going to be a bit of cookie handing around for how the single user servers authenticate themselves, or how the browsers authenticate themselves with the single user servers and the multi-user server. But
yeah, I think we get that, and particularly because we've tried to think about this as well, and think that the proxies are the crux of it, really, isn't it? Because we've given, we've got users to tunnel ports around to try and get running.
Yeah, and there are
really more than one person talking to the one node, one machine. You need a proxy. Yeah.
Yeah, and once you've got, go ahead.
I'm not sure what I was going to say, but I will just say that, and the cookie thing. I mean, so we might be thinking about this independently. We've had quite a lot of experience with doing security work. I've got a colleague who I'll be talking about this tomorrow. So, I'd like to think we could be, as soon as there's something pretty rough, we can trying it out and keep giving some help if we can.
Yeah, once you got even the roughest of prototypes. So right now, the prototype I have is it's on single user servers, but those single user servers do echo username just to make sure that it actually exists. Yeah, once you've got the basic level of a prototype that actually starts notebook servers, that will all be public and announced on mailing lists and everything.
And it's going to be a separate repo, a separate sort of project, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And of course you don't know how long it's going to take, and it sounds like the concept of the IPython 3 release is going to be separate from this now.
Yeah, IPython 3 will be sometime in the fall.
Yeah.
We've said that we're aiming for September the 1st, but we're in the awareness that we will probably miss.
Yeah, aiming for September the 1st,
yeah.
Meaning that is the absolute earliest.
Well, we'll be watching it like a hawk, and we've probably got to crack on with something, but we hope we can keep an eye on it and then use yours as soon as we can.
Yeah, and there are tools like IPython and things that kind of make this a bit simpler, and the main disadvantage they have is I guess that they're not us, so they have to work within the constraints of IPython not knowing it's involved. Right. And we're kind of figuring out a baseline thing for what the single user server needs to know about the multi-user context and things like that.
Yeah, I can see this quite a lot. Okay, well, that's really what I need to know. So that's
yeah.
I have a question about the multi-user interface, so that will be later. Do you already know which kind of framework are you going to use to develop the graphical user interface of the notebook? So will be like Backbone or I don't know.
So the notebook UI. So there are multiple things here. The multi-user server is not going to have it in the initial release that we're doing right now is not going to have things like live collaboration or sharing or anything. It's just going to be spawning single user servers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no UI to change in the notebook.
Yeah, I mean, for the future, do you already know which kind of framework will be used to develop something like that, if it's planned, or if not, then? Okay.
Yes and no. We've been looking at it. We've been looking at a few things. We've had relatively good experience using the Backbone stuff and the widgets that we're going to try to move most of the IPython entities to a kind of a Backbone model.
Okay.
Backbone model. And so we've got one of the problems we have in the JavaScript is that there's one notebook object, which is model, view, and controller all at once. And it's all deeply coupled and kind of a mess. And one of the things we've been meaning to get to is separating out the thing that stores and manages the notebook structure, the thing that draws the notebook structure on the page, and the thing that talks to the REST API of the notebook server.
Okay.
And having those three things be drawing better boundaries between those three things.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I had some people having experience with the RStudio server interface. I used it. I'm not an R user, so I just set up it on a server, and I had the chance to have a look at the several functionalities that they implemented in that interface.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's for like next year, so it's a long-term target.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some features that maybe can be implemented because they are sharing the same aim, like to have an interactive workspace online. But they are pretty different. But there are something like that you can log in and you can start a new project, and automatically the new project is added on GitHub if you have set up the username and things like that. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, they're different. How we are using, because they're using both the notebook and the RStudio. RStudio is just R, so they can deploy their project, their algorithms in R using RStudio, and then call them from a longer workflow that involve R and other software from the notebook. So they can develop the code in R using the proper IDE for R, and then call the same code that is on the same server, so they know where they already know the file system. So because they are also based on the Unix user, so you have your home, your project directory. That's cool.
Yeah. So I think that's what we've got, unless I don't think we had anybody else show up. So if you've got anything more to talk about, Thomas, do you have anything you want to make sure the world knows about? All 2 people on the internet?
If any of our viewers are coming to SciPy next week, then come and see various talks about IPython, tutorials about IPython, and IPython BOF that you can take part in. I'm also jointly organising a Python 3 in SciPy BOF. We're going to have Nick Coughlin from Core Python flying into SciPy from Australia, so we can talk about what new features we want to see in Python 3.5, what things we could do with function annotations, etc. So it should be fun. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, internet.
Thank you, world. We'll see you first Tuesday of August.
Yeah. Oh, I won't be. All right.
Bye.
See ya.
Okay.